Finally, what many have been expecting has happened. Russia has started selling oil at a loss. This is when oil-producing companies, due to sanctions and a huge discount, are forced to sell oil below the cost of production, simply because they literally cannot stop that very production. That would be even more expensive. So it turned out that today, oil production by Russian oil companies has become unprofitable because of the discounts they give to buyers in India and China. The price of the Russian oil-grade Urals has dropped to $33–34 per barrel in the ports of the Baltic and Black Seas, and its discount to Brent has reached $27 per barrel. But that's not all. Clever China asked for a bigger discount, so the Russians now sell oil to China at $35 off per barrel. You may wonder why Russia continues to sell oil to itself at a loss. We'll discuss that in this episode. KPLER data also indicated that Russian oil supplies to India in December 2025 were just over 1 million barrels per day. It seems like a lot, but this is the lowest figure since November 2022, when India began actively buying cheap Russian oil amid Russia's war against Ukraine. And finally, the final blow to the Russian economy. The head of the Ministry of Finance of the Russian Federation, Anton Silvanov, stated that the share of oil and gas revenues in the Russian budget will decrease in the short term since reserves of low-cost hydrocarbons are running out. Yes, the gas station isn't eternal. My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, leave any comment, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechi News. The link is in the description. Friends, have you noticed how we're constantly drawn to watching negative news? I'm sure that most of you, when you wake up, reach for your phone to check the latest news, and it's the negative news that grabs your attention more than the regular ones. But why does this happen? And how can we avoid overloading ourselves, especially during the New Year holidays? To figure this out, I encourage you to watch this video, the link to it, plus I'll leave the link in the description of this video. I highly recommend you check it out and watch it, because it's a very interesting psychological trick of our brain that pushes us to focus specifically on negative news. So, oil market analysts pleasantly surprised us today. Oil production by Russian oil companies has become unprofitable due to the discounts they give to buyers in India and China. As it turned out, last week the price of the Russian Urals grade fell to $33–34 per barrel in the ports of the Baltic and Black Seas. This is the lowest level since the COVID pandemic. And its discount to the Brent grade reached $27 per barrel. These are interesting consequences, but there's more. China, as a true ally of Russia, sensing the smell of blood, immediately decided to take advantage of the situation. And individual batches for Chinese oil refineries were sold at a discount of $35 per barrel, which is basically half price. China basically said, if you don't accept our terms, we won't buy your oil. The Russians have no choice, since stopping oil production is extremely difficult. It's a very complicated technological process. If your oil field is already up and running, it's very hard to mothball it. And that's why the Russians don't have the money for this, and they don't have the technology for it either. I'll explain why a bit later. And, accordingly, they have to sell this oil even at a loss, just so, the oil doesn't spill over the top. As a result, Russia's oil industry is barely profitable, with some projects losing money, partly because extraction is so complex. We'll discuss extraction complexity separately. It's an interesting point. As is known, deposits that are subject to a reduced mineral extraction tax rate continue to operate with a small profit. This is a major source of oil and gas revenue for Russia's budget. So, according to Reuters, about 20 oil producers in Russia pay zero mineral extraction tax and receive a trading profit of $20 per barrel, even at current EUR/ALS prices. About 30 more companies use a preferential rate and also remain profitable. But this means that even though these companies seem to be earning for the budget, they actually pay almost nothing. And that's supposed to be the idea. They should be bringing profit to the state. As a result, Only the old fields in the Volga region and western Siberia with large reserves and, importantly, proximity to the oil pipeline are doing more or less well. But the fields with the full mineral extraction tax rate, that is, the mineral extraction tax, which are geographically far from the pipeline and have difficult extraction conditions, are already bringing in a loss of $5 for every barrel sold. But it would be fair to say that some companies in Russia are still making money from oil. They are still getting at least some profit. And here Reuters gives us some very interesting math. So the price of Urals oil is about $40, and that's with the discount included. Out of this money, about $26, that's 65%, goes to taxes, and almost another $4 as well. These are the costs for the well, up to $7, and these are the expenses for transporting this oil. In the end, $3 per barrel remain. It would seem that this is the income that should cover the company's investment expenses for future production, drilling, and maintaining the fields. There's a $3 profit, yet it almost feels like there isn't one. But don't forget, the oil industry of the Russian Federation, which has already been hit by sanctions and has lost companies access to Western equipment, is gradually sliding into crisis. Don't believe it? Here are a few more numbers for you. In the first half of the year, Rosneft's profits fell threefold, Lukoil's by half, Gazprom Neft's by 54%, and Surgutneftgaz became unprofitable, losing 454 billion rubles in 6 months. Russia's oil and gas budget revenues for January to November 2025 dropped by 21%, and in December they were the lowest since August 2020. The Russian government based the 2026 budget on the assumption that Urals oil would cost $56 per barrel, but so far actual prices are a third, or 30% lower than that level. But this is just the beginning. Bloomberg reports that the volume of Russian oil supplies to India in December 2025 amounted to about 1.1 million barrels, just over 1 million barrels per day, which will be the lowest figure since November 2022. In November of that year, India bought nearly 1.8 million barrels of oil per day from Russia. And so, according to calculations, in the second week of December, amid increased United States sanctions against the Russian oil industry, oil purchases from Russia to India dropped to 712,000 barrels per day. But then they increased to 1.1 million. Some Indian oil refineries simply found loopholes to buy oil not from sanctioned Russian companies. But this still didn't allow them to restore the volumes that existed before the sanctions. And even under these conditions, Indian officials stated that by the end of December, imports are dropping to 800,000 barrels per day. The next piece of news is the one that personally made me the happiest. So, all of this is clear. Sanctions, discounts, and so on. But there is just a fundamental piece of news. The Minister of Finance of the Russian Federation, Anton Silvanov, admitted that the share of oil and gas revenues in the Russian budget will decrease in the medium and long term, because reserves of low-cost hydrocarbons in Russia are running out. According to him, the easiest extraction conditions in Russia are already over, and extraction in hard-to-reach layers is becoming increasingly expensive. And that's why taxes on the oil and gas sector will have to be reduced further, quote Silvanov. We are providing additional preferential tax regimes, and we fully understand that we cannot count on high levels of oil and gas revenues in the long term. This matters because if companies are losing money with easy extraction now, what happens if extraction costs rise several times? Plus, don't forget, if the tax is removed from oil companies, the budget will be replenished at the expense of the cloud. According to Silvanov, this year the share of oil and gas revenues in the treasury has dropped to 23, although just a few years ago it reached 50. Moreover, the Russian Ministry of Finance has already calculated that in 5 years Russia as a whole will no longer be able to rely on oil revenues. In the baseline scenario, which is based on an oil price of $69 per barrel, the share of oil and gas revenues will decrease to 13% of the budget in 17 years, and in the conservative scenario, which assumes a lower oil price, it will drop to 9% of the budget. But, as you understand, there is no price anywhere near $69. And I'll give you another quote from Silvanov to cheer you up even more. The very existence of Russia on the global oil market is in question, according to the Energy Strategy 2050, which the government approved, requiring significant investments, technological breakthroughs, and changes in regulation. The economy may already face a drastic drop in oil production in the coming years, from the current 520 million tons per year to 477 million tons by 2036 and 287 million tons by 2050. That's nearly half. At the same time, oil exports will have to be reduced threefold to 79 million tons per year in the stress scenario, which includes tougher Western sanctions and the world's accelerated move away from hydrocarbons. By 2050, Russia will produce only 171 million tons of oil annually, which is 3 times less than now, and there will be no barrels left for export at all. The export volume will drop to zero. End of Silvanov's quote. And on this wonderful note, I will leave it at that. Share your opinions and emotions in the comments below this episode. And friends, if you found this episode interesting and useful, you can support this channel with your donation or a paid sponsorship subscription using the links and details provided. In the description of this video, it says support Alexei Pechi's channel. Choose any format that's convenient for you. I will be grateful for any support from you. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.